place in there. But what about the design of your graphic book? Did you do the design? Did Steve do it? Because you have, Leslie presumably had a pre-existing text. In that case, although she added stuff.
I think the process, I think she took the, well, you know, we can ask Tom, but my feeling was that she took the photographs while she was there, and the text came, if not simultaneously, it came after, and then she actually presented me.
She presented you with those pictures.
No, Leslie laid it out.
She laid out the book with Steve Clay, because Steve is a very activist publisher who's not here. He's one of the collaborators in that book.
But that actually came a little bit later. Leslie, I think, really had an idea. In fact,
she laid out that large grid size with
Leslie wanted it to
pictures.
be even larger, and I think that's where Steve said no, because it couldn't fit on a bookshelf. Leslie, this is...
Do we have a physical copy of that?
Yeah, it's right there. She wanted it larger, and she also did not want it to be some special edition of, you know, where I worked directly in it so that there were only 10 copies. She wanted something that people could have.
Right. Which is the way Steve Clay often publishes.
Yes.
In highly limited editions.
And because it is one piece, so it is in a sense one poem. The design that came into I think the paper, I mean, this is where Steve came in, and even the overlap, I mean, even the fact that each page opens up and is double has to do with just the fact that it's a book and it has to have some kind of weight to it. Yeah, so that's where she has...
So she presented you already with the grids of the four.
Yeah, she
did.
She
saw them. Of course, I would say this relates to what I was saying before. She saw that as an extension of yet another unit of the work. And then you started to replace.
I didn't replace anything. As I say,
she
left me very little space. But
you used it well.
I used it well, and I tried to, as always, touch minimally. You know, I guess I'm a less is more. You know, yeah, which is absolutely the opposite of Petah Coyne.
Well, the nature of what you were talking about was something entirely different. You didn't have to do the book. You did that book, but you're saying that based on her poem, you took the poem and did these epic, large-scale works.
My work would not fit in a book.
No. One thing about that work that you're showing is obviously something that's printable or even reproducible, despite the slides. I say that getting the digital slides, like I said initially, really lose the essential unreproducibility of the thickness. But you were using the poem to make the work, so the work itself was like a kind of a psychic blueprint of some kind, or inspiration, the more traditional word to use.
Total inspiration.
Yeah.
We would pass it back and forth, and I would make things and send images to her, and she would keep working on this.
And she would work on the poem, bouncing off the images that you said. So really, so in order to really experience the collaboration, it would almost be she would have to read it as she did, as you described, in the gallery with the piece.
She would send me parts of it. It went back and forth. I think we spent about a year on it. You know, she would send me little pieces of it. I would send an image back, and we would go back and forth. We spent a lot of time on the telephone,
and she would fax you, and when you would get sections that were faxed to you, or that you read, would you then change what you were doing, or you were in the process of working anyway?
I started a lot of work.
Not dark enough.
My dealer was not happy with me. She was not happy with Leslie.
How long of a time was it that you were working on that series?
This poem, I spent, those images I showed you was probably 7 years. I worked on it.
So what I have to agree, it's apparent seeing it, but I never took that in before. Plus I have that little beautiful post-Apollo book, which is the tip of the iceberg of the actual collaboration. Although, from the point of view of the text, Scalapino is looking at this work that she knows, and she's bouncing off that, she's writing, sending stuff for you, and then writing additionally, if I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it is,
But she.
it works both ways.
Yeah, she only worked about it probably a year and a half on this. Yeah, and then she said, oh, I'm done. Thanks, Leslie.
But during that time, she was sending stuff
Back and forth.
to you.
Yeah, I have it all, because I printed it all. Yeah, it's in the files, but I kept going, because I was not happy with it.
Yeah, so it's both. It is a term I'm interested in, but goes to the heart of it. That's why in my work with Leslie Scalapino, I work with Amy Stillman, also a friend of Leslie's regard. Amy does not like the word, she kept saying what you call, it's a famous word, ekphrastic, right, which could mean a poem about painting, but it means other things too, but this is the typical term that one would use. You have a painting and somebody writes a poem about it, and she says to me, well, what do you call the opposite? When the painting is about the poem, which of course is what we were working on back and forth too, and you are, and I said, illustration is a famous word. She didn't like that. I understood that she didn't like that. So we came up with our own word, which isn't perfect, but iconophrastic. So ekphrastic and iconophrastic. It kind of is not perfect, but it sounds good, which is the most important thing. But you're working also in this back and forth between the ekphrastic and the iconophrastic, bouncing off the images and so on. But to understand the nature of your work, the collaboration could actually never be seen in its totality, what it was. The textual layer in that book is just a small part of what it is. But one might imagine if one had a large exhibition of those pieces, and one either had a recording or of Leslie reading it, or the text in the context of the actual physical work, the three-dimensional work, that would be the collaboration, right, from your point of view. It's actually three-dimensional. I'm interested in this because I'm interested in the idea that it's not, it's poetry. It's not poetry on. It's not the collaboration is not existing on the page. It's a collaboration with sculpture, and that the work itself in Scalapino is sculptural to some degree. It's three-dimensional. To understand what you're doing together, you have to see her work almost like a holograph projected in as sculptural space with the sculptures. So the book is really just like a blueprint or a document of what actually is an imaginary three-dimensional piece. So, any questions from Tom? A comment from Tom?
I'll just make a comment. It's something
and this is Tom White, whose name has been mentioned in times.
Something that's occurred to me about what you're describing as the three-dimensionality of it that didn't really occur to me unless I'm still alive, but because I'm a scientist, I think in terms of how the sensory system actually works. And so when bats use echolocation or dolphins use sonar, they create a three-dimensional space that has the same resolution that we have with our visual sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a sense, the combination of Leslie's language and the sound of her voice is creating a three-dimensional high-resolution space. So
yeah, that's why the sound files are so important. But I completely agree with this idea of bats or kind of sonic three-dimensional, or I would actually say four-dimensional space because of the temporal element. So that's, I mean, of course it's true of this too. This also, if you look at it, and your work surely suggests aspects of 3D. A number of filmmakers around you are interested in photography of images of film.
Yeah, I think it does in all three, whether it's a camouflage component of yours, which is hidden but in plain view, and the three-dimensionality with Petah's, and then of course both the fragmentary succession, the iterations that are in the language but are also iterated in different frames in Konrad's work, you still get that image of dimensionality, four dimensions.
Complete.
Well, I find it very difficult to grasp this. I mean, I've known Leslie quite a number of years and didn't know about all these collaborations, but what you were saying about the difference seems almost unable, I can almost not grasp how she was able to deal with all these different components that you all threw at her. Doesn't seems like it's all over the place.
She had an extremely curious mind. Feeling way.
Well, and also, and with the kinky too, I mean, they're also very specific projects that relate.
Yeah,
True
each
words
one's
of words,
specific and different.
But, yeah,
And
but
she
the
did,
ability to go different places.
she was really interested in the dance stuff, so, well, this is a visual poem. I would add again to my sense of thinking of poetry collaborations with visual arts or otherwise as not just two-dimensional on a page, not just a picture and the words. As much as I love that, page only, but entering into the world, either through movement, film, or especially sculpture, which I think is very much the part of. Then the dance, which through Tom we put up on Penn Sound, is look at these long dance performances, which there's a couple, 2 or 3 that we put up. That's actually very important to understand her conception of what we're talking about. The Zen dance pieces that she wrote, the librettos and the mise-en-scenes for. So you get a sense of how she stays in. She was working on those the last several years of her life. That was a very important part of what we're talking about, this dance theater. So in a way, it's a kind of a total, so what I would say about her work, it's a kind of a total art project from the point of view of a poet. Sometimes think of it in terms of opera, but I think her conception was something like, not total theater, but let's say total poetry. Poetry of the text extends outside of the actual alphabetic material on the page, to the sound recordings, to the sonic space, to the verbal, visual, vocal materials, and then to film. I mean, I think that's the way she would put together, as not fragmented, but as a total project. And everybody isn't in favor of the kind of total project, but I think her work is a total project in the way that she conceived it. It's a kind of psychic total space that she was trying to create. And these are sort of sketches for how you might imagine what the work is. So hearing these 3 presentations, I think when you go back to read the text, you see the text itself is a score that opens up into these spaces with the actual, that it's not just something on the page.
In fact, the piece that was produced after she passed,
Flowing Crocodile.
Right,
Slowly
Fiona
Crocodile.
Templeton.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes,
if
I was
anybody
thinking
saw
of
that,
yeah.
I mean, I mean, I felt like she got, wherever she wanted to go, she got there for me with that piece.
And that was slightly earlier. Fiona Templeton did such a beautiful job. And then Tom and, again, Litmus are doing this play, emergent play, Les Scalapino drama, theater.
It's the award for innovative women playwrights.
Innovative Women Players, which premiered
continue-
last week. Joelle
Continue
Sweeney.
her interest in combining the language, art with theater
Yeah.
by giving emerging women writers an opportunity to have their play be recognized with an award, a stage reading, and a full production and publication of the play. So the first one was last week, Monday. There'll be one every year.
And while it wouldn't have to be, it also relates to Poets Theater, not in New York, to make a distinction between that and other aspects of theater, but the person who won the first award is primarily a poet fiction writer, so.
But to push the limits of experimental theater like each of the artists and filmmakers have done in their own work.
Ms. Coyne, how do you say your name?
Coyne, Petah Coyne.
Yeah, I got it. Your background, religious-wise, with your choice of hell, could you talk more about what Leslie, your back and forth with Leslie about Helen? What happened to the pieces after your collaboration ended?
My background is, my father is in the military, so we traveled all over the world. And so the only thing that was the same ever was our religion. And so whenever we went to a new town, which was continual, they always took us to the church first so that we would have a home. And so, and every place that we went, we always said the rosary. So every day we were saying the rosary. And the only time that we got away from not saying is if we pretended we were asleep, so we were always asleep in the back seat of the car. So religion was a very big thing in our our house. And so, yes, I always think of, religion was like big in our house. And I guess as every good Catholic girl, I always thought I would be a nun. I had to be a nun to get to, the nuns told us that if you wanted to live on Fifth Avenue in heaven, which was forever, you had to be a nun. And so, I was going to live on Fifth Avenue. It was for eternity, right? And when I fell in love, at age 13, I thought, my God, Avenue A forever. Sure. So I thought it would be hell forever. So I really looked hard at the images of hell, and then they began to look a little more interesting. But I do have that fear. The nuns always pointed to the Madonna on the front of, she was always on this diving board platform, and they always said, when you become 20, you will become this. And I thought, oh, thank God, I will finally be perfect when I'm 20. And I remember thinking, that's when it will happen. And then when I got to be about that age, I thought, God, I'm no closer. And I just, and I remember when I met Leslie, we would giggle a lot about how imperfect we were and how far away it was. And so we had that kind of humor and that we really enjoyed a lot. And all the work that I have, that I make, I'm very fortunate it goes mostly into museums, except for what I can keep. I really, if I was really, really wealthy, I wouldn't let anybody have my work. I would keep it all. I love my work. I really, they are, this is going to sound horrible, they're so close to me, and I feel very attached to them, and I love to be around them, because they're very, very hard to put out into this world, to make, and so by the time they're finally made, I never want to have them leave me. And
where is the Scalapino tree?
the Scalapino tree is owned by the Kemper Museum. I'm very fortunate they made a special place for it, and it's there. It's in Kansas City. So if you ever go there, please see it. It's an exhibit.
Kansas City.
I hope that answers your question. I'm so glad you're interested. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. I was just curious about her childhood and her teenage years. Where did she grow up?
Well, let
Tom
Tom
answer.
speak as for the family. I know the answer to that too, but.
Well, actually, she wrote what she called the autobiography in books, which is over there called this, or an autobiography that describes aspects of her early life, but not in any ordinary sense of an autobiography like anything else she ever wrote. So, but she grew up in Berkeley.
That's a great.
Was her father a professor at Cal?
Yeah, her father.
Yes,
her father was Scalapino.
Her father was the important.
Was the political science professor. That is, oh boy, that explains a lot.
Wow. Right.
I don't know. Because I know his work very well. That explains a lot.
There is a certain level of commentary on that issue, and she's very close to both of her parents, and indeed, her father died after her, slightly. Tom was very close to her father. His father was doing lectures when he was like 90 in Korea and so on.
Yeah,
So the father is a very important Asia specialist as a professor in music college.
But all I can say is that in response to that, common reaction to finding out who her father was, that she never agreed with any of her father's political positions whatsoever, but was constantly attacked by fellow students, other poets, and colleagues and professors, as if she held her father's views. So
Yeah, which was an odd,
yeah. So
I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but it's a
dismissal of her as being her father.
I'm not familiar with her at all, but obviously her artwork I'm seeing here is a complete rejection of her father's.
since her father's coming up, I would emphasize that although this is certainly true, that she didn't share her father's views, both coming out of the 60s and the anti-war movement. Father had a different view about that. She was very close to her father. She did not
Yeah,
project that in terms of her personal relationship with him. Just
Exactly.
Since we talk about a person and how a person is in the world,
yeah.
which that was not true of me. My father, I was, just interested.
Yeah, so she
Interested that she
lived
was
in
that kind
Japan
of
for
person.
2 years when she was 7 and 13, which had a profound effect on her interest in Japanese writing because of women.
And she
They
went
traveled
on
all
trips.
over the world.
She went all over the world on trips with her parents. So you two didn't have exactly
No,
the same background.
sisters
Well,
are just different mothers.
I think it's almost 10, so we should thank this three terrific
Thank you.
collaborators. Make an excursion out to Kansas.
They go to California.
Philadelphia.